The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everybody, to the Insight Group's webinar on measuring the effectiveness of your content marketing campaigns. Over the next 40 minutes, we will be discussing how to develop campaign-specific KPIs for granular impact measurement and generating actionable insights in order to refine your future content efforts. My name is Nick Johnson. I am the founder of the Insight Group, and I am going to be your host today. The webinar itself forms part of the agenda for this year's Content Marketing Summit, which takes place in Chicago on November the 16th and the 17th. The event is going to be bringing together over 150 senior executives from some of the world's biggest brands to discuss this year's most pressing content challenges and opportunities, from developing a consistent and collaborative approach internally to maximizing the reach and accessibility of your content campaigns. Before we get started with today's discussion, I just want to remind you that we are recording this webinar. So every one of you is going to be receiving the audio recordings next week. The webinar is also very much an interactive experience. So we will have a couple of anonymous polls taking place throughout the discussion. So please do vote and get involved there. I also urge you to type in your own questions in the chat box that you should see on the screen in front of you so that we can ensure that our insights are tailored to your challenges, very much like our conferences. You can do this at any point, and I will be sure to incorporate those into the discussion throughout the webinar itself. Last thing, we will be using the hashtag ICMS, which you can see at the right-hand side of this slide, the top corner there. So any questions or additional thoughts, please do tweet away as well. We have some fantastic practitioners on our call with us today who are going to be sharing their experiences. So I just want to run through those and introduce them to you first. So our first is Jeff Pundyk. Jeff is the Vice President of Global Integrated Content Solutions for The Economist. We also have Ana Villegas, who is the Marketing Director for the North America Commercial Business for Dell. And then we have Reinhardt Schuhmann, who is a Product Manager at the company Tracx. And finally, Dave Savoy, Digital Marketing and Strategy Director from Farmers Insurance. Before we do get started with our discussion and our first poll, I just want to give each of those speakers a little bit of a chance to introduce themselves, to shed a little bit of light on their respective roles and their companies. So I'm first going to go across to Jeff. And Jeff, I'd just like you to give us a little bit of insight into what it is you do at The Economist and where you fit within the organization. So Jeff.
Sure, thank you. So I'm sure everyone's familiar with The Economist. We call it the newspaper. You know it as a magazine. My piece of the puzzle is that I oversee a group of people who do what we call thought leadership, which is often thought of as sponsored content or branded content marketing. And we work with the biggest brands in the world to create content that is based on research that we do through the Economist Intelligence Unit and then comes to life in all different formats, both print and text, video, digital, interactive, often connected through advertising on the economist.com, but not always. And our primary areas that we work in are technology, financial services, energy, and with a lot of big foundations.
Fantastic. Okay, cool. Thanks very much, Jeff. Anna, I'd like to move over to you next. So if you could give us a little bit of detail into your role at Dell.
Sure. So I sit in the commercial organization, which is basically the business-to-business that markets and companies that have 100 employees and above. And I have a team who is responsible for our digital strategy for North America. So we, have a combine of efforts we do across from media, programmatic by looking at audiences, all the way to lead generation programs and working with multiple publishers and technology vendors to figure out what's the best way to improve the relationship with our customers. I think that the main difference in my role of what more like a B2C type of role will be is that we focus on the long term. We are not transactional, and it's all about the content and how we develop that relationship, adding value to the customer through time. So after 18 months or 2 years, they eventually become, our trusted customer, and they have all their investments and the solutions that they have around cloud, big data, security, and so on with Dell.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you very much for that context, Anna. Reinhardt, I'd like to move to you next. So could you give us a little bit of insight into Tracx and your role at the company?
Yeah, absolutely. Tracx is a technology company. Specifically, we are a social media management system focused on big enterprise customers. Our products kind of fall into two categories. One is geared towards managing a large social presence across multiple channels with many different accounts. And then the other side is social media data collection and analysis. So we're kind of experts in collecting large chunks of unstructured data and sorting it and cleaning it and adding structure to it. As far as my role, I'm a product manager here, kind of overseeing every stage of the product life cycle from ideation through development and QA, and kind of managing our existing products as well as brainstorming and coming up with new things to roll out. And my focus tends to be more on our analytics products, just because it's kind of my background before coming to Tracx.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks very much for that, Reinhardt. And
Sure.
Last but certainly not least, Dave, if you could let us know a little bit about what it is that you're doing at Farmers Insurance.
Certainly glad to. So I am the Digital Marketing and Strategy Director for Farmers Insurance, focusing on our life line of business. And that's a pretty comprehensive role, looking at how we can drive customers' awareness and consideration of farmers' life offerings. So developing all of our digital marketing channels, so search, social, display, email, various forms of retargeting, and so on. And then once they get to the site, then I also have folks helping me out with our site optimization, so site marketing, presenting tools, obviously content in various forms for customers to further research and then hopefully decide to either get a quote or purchase online a life insurance policy with us. I also oversee the analytics from end to end of the experience, and then looking forward to the next 5 years in terms of our roadmap strategy. So benchmarking, what is our competition doing, where is the customer going, not just for insurance, but what are their expectations for online content and purchase process. So really facilitating the journey from end to end.
Okay, great. Cool. Well, thanks very much for that, Dave, and to all of our panelists. I think hopefully everybody can see that we have a wide diversity of experiences, companies, and job roles, and I'm sure this is going to be a very illuminating discussion. Before we get started, we would like to open up a poll for everybody that is listening in and participating in the webinar. There will be a multiple choice, 4 questions, as you should be able to see coming up in front of you now. You can select one answer, and I'm going to give you about 15 seconds or so to take your pick. This is just to give us a bit of a sense as to the state of investment in content marketing at the companies who are joining with us. So if you, for whatever reason, are struggling to read that in front of you, the question is, how would you describe your company's investment plans when it comes to content marketing in 2016. We are reducing investment in content marketing. We are maintaining our current investment level in content marketing. We are increasing our investment, and we are significantly increasing our investment in content marketing. So we are going to close that up in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 seconds. So we will close that poll now, and we're just going to get the results for you. And as you can see, it looks like the most obvious selection for the majority of people is that we are increasing investment in content marketing. Although, interestingly, significant increases seem to be relatively rare amongst the people that are listening in. Somewhat reassuringly, given the topic of both the webinar and the conference that we're running, we are reducing investment in content marketing is the clear loser with only 5% of the votes. I would like to see if we can get some feedback from some of our speakers on these results, see whether they have incited them to think anything in particular, or get their takeaways on what we're seeing here. So Jeff, I'd like to come to you first and just see what these results seem to mean to you and what you can take away from what we're seeing in front of us here.
Yeah, well, I'm not surprised about the results. I think last year was the big year where we would have seen a significant increase because people were really just getting started over the past, 24 months, 18 months. And last year we saw a really big uptick. This year we're seeing a lot more consolidation. So I think, the idea of that we're increasing but not dramatically increasing is makes a lot of sense, and it really is very on point to the topic of this discussion, because really as more and more and more money is pouring into this area, the question keeps coming up is how do you measure success? How do we know that we're doing it right? And that's actually in many ways giving people pause about pouring even more money in until they get a better understanding of how to judge success.
Fantastic. Okay, great. Thanks very much, Jeff. Anna, I wonder if you have any views on this. Is this something in terms of the results that you're seeing here that look surprising, or would you share Jeff's point of view that this is broadly what we should be expecting given where we are in content's maturation?
Yeah, no, I think it reflects the trends we are seeing also in technology. So technology is allowing, from a media buy and from the way we engage with content to really have the customer be at the heart of what he can get. So all these algorithms, all the fact that you can retarget the customer, that you can exactly know who he is, what he's doing, where he is, it means that you really need to have more content in order to be able to be ahead of the game. So I think this is a reflection of what's happening with how we engage with the customer, how we're buying our media, how everything is now moving into digital, how social is changing, and it's going to just keep going up because content just becomes really the first thing we need to think about.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for that. And Reinhardt, in terms of both your own experiences in your role and Tracx more broadly and the customers that you guys have, are you seeing that the big spike in terms of investment in content was last year, as Jeff is saying, and that this year we're starting to look into finding ROI from that content and measuring its effectiveness slightly better?
Well, actually, what's interesting to me about this question is sort of what is meant by investment, because the trend that I've sort of seen, I would say, for maybe the past several years is reflected in the results here. When you talk about the financial budget, maybe that's maintained or it's increasing slightly over time, but I definitely see an increase in investment in terms of types of content and outlets to put content on. So in some sense, what I've seen is kind of a push to do more and to diversify media types with maybe close to the same budget that had come before.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Okay, fantastic. Thank you. And Dave, do you have any final thoughts? I appreciate it might be hard to come up with something after we've already had 3 people come through. But is there anything that jumps out at you from the statistics that you see here?
Well, so to the question, do the results surprise me? I would say no. I think that this makes a lot of sense in terms of where, just internally, I've seen our company start to, direct its internal resources, not just time, but but funds as well, in terms of annual budgets and whatnot. Some of it comes from being able to tie back the ultimate ROI, and then some of the other KPIs that you can look to as measures of the success of a certain type of content or types of content, which is really, I think, just because I kind of understand these results doesn't mean I think that this is necessarily where our focus should be. So I think that there probably should be more significant investment in content marketing, not just for farmers, but probably across industries, because you've got to keep in mind that there are multiple types of content, and as video content in particular becomes more the norm, interactive online assets become just commonplace. The customers tend to expect these things, which are not as cheap as, let's say, writing pages of copy which are distributed via newsletter, online content, articles, and whatnot. So the types of content marketing channels are changing, evolving, and actually becoming more expensive. So to maintain even your current level of interaction with the customer is going to require more and more investment.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Dave. I'd like to move on to our first of our questions for our 4 speakers. So thank you, everyone, for giving us your feedback in that poll. And again, those results will be distributed to you after we finish this call. Our first question really looks at the why. So why is it that we're measuring content marketing and its effectiveness? Why is that so important? Is it simply to prove ROI, given that companies seem to be investing more and more in this space, or should we be looking for something rather more than that? So Jeff, I would like to go to you first and get your point of view as to the importance of measuring the effectiveness of content campaigns. Why do you think it is that this is such an increasingly important area?
Well, starting at the beginning of why we're doing content in the first place, I think Anna really speaks to it a little bit in her response to you earlier, in that the balance of power has shifted. So the consumer, the client, the customer, whoever you're working with, now has really all the leverage, and the brand has so little. So the old methods of talking at your customers through advertising just are not effective anymore, and customers are now looking for real utility and engagement from the brands that they care about, and that's why content is a good answer. But we are very much in transition between the old paradigm of advertising and the new paradigm of engagement. And as we go through that transition, some of the legacy ways of thinking about what is a successful campaign are being carried over, and they're not necessarily applicable. So there's a lot of subtlety and nuance to how you think about content differently from how you would think about advertising and the old ways of communicating with your customers. One quick data point: we did a study. This was last year, but I think it's probably still relevant, where we asked marketers why they used content, and 85% of them said that the primary reason for creating content was to build brand and to position the company positively broadly. Then we asked them how do they measure the effectiveness of their content, and 70% of them said that they measured it based on calls from prospects or customers. So you can see there's a pretty big disconnect between the goals that they stated and the way they're measuring success.
Interesting. Interesting. Dave, I'd like to move to you to get your point of view on that. I mean, Jeff just mentioned there being a relatively fundamental paradigm shift away from advertising and towards engagement, and yet the measurement tools that we are using and the way that we're measuring are somewhat out of step with that. What are the things that you're attempting to do with measuring the effectiveness of content, and why is it that you're focusing on them?
So I agree completely with what Jeff said. I mean, I think that there is a massive paradigm shift that's been taking place over the past several years towards engaging with the customer and moving away from the old ad model, which is basically a kind of a direct response type thing. You place an ad, you expect to get either quotes or leads or sales, right? So something kind of tangible, so to speak, as a result. Which has become sort of the expectation for senior management and the executive teams when they're looking at where they're going to spend their money, what programs are they going to invest in the next year, the next 5 years. So that when you say, well, I'm not going to generate leads right away or not generate sales in the current month that we're running the campaign, that becomes more of a tougher sell. So you need to start looking at how the content marketing strategies you have are going to help facilitate that process down the road, which they should. You can say, for example, we plan to drive awareness of our brand, and we will measure that by eyeballs on screen. So how many people do we get our ads in front of? How many people do we drive to the site? So how long do they spend there? And you start looking at these other kind of website metrics to see how engaged consumers are with your brand. Thinking kind of an analogous situation of like a banner that someone sees on the web to a billboard that someone might see driving down the highway. Maybe they're not going to click or call right away, but you've kind of gotten in front of them, and there's that little bug in the back of their mind, so that later on, it's kind of a multi-step process, and you need to look at various things besides that ultimate goal. Ultimately, you do want to increase sales, so there has to be some attribution modeling in place to say, what the value is at each step, but you can look at these steps kind of independently to say what the value is that you're driving.
Okay, thank you. So Reinhardt, it seems that we're in a relatively complicated place right now in terms of getting a pretty holistic view of the effectiveness of content marketing. Could you let us know a little bit about your opinion as to why it is this is so important? Why is it so important to measure the effectiveness of content campaigns, and maybe how is it that you guys would advocate we do that better?
Sure. This idea of engaging with consumers that was discussed in the course of answering this question is very relevant for us. I mean, at Tracx, that's sort of what we measure. Essentially, we're tracking social conversations and mentions of brands in social, both through direct brand engagement and through sort of, unsolicited or earned brand engagement. So it's very much, a part of everything we do as a company. As far as why measuring the effectiveness of these campaigns is important, I certainly agree with everything that's already been said. The other side of it to me, and this is something that comes out of that consumer engagement that is so prominent now, is through measuring all aspects of your campaigns. Now, because of all the rich consumer data that we have as far as, text responses or actions taken or views and all these sort of things, you can actually use that data to optimize not only future campaigns, but really your entire business or your product line or whatever that might be. I think it's just important to keep in mind that, we're living in a time where there's so much more access to consumer opinions and thoughts on products that it would always be a misstep not to leverage that. So while you always want to, deliver some measure of ROI in your campaign, and that will never not be important, you can also now leverage this information to actually better understand your consumers.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for that. And I think that's a really, really important point. This is another opportunity for us to understand our consumers better and then target both our products and one would assume one's content marketing campaigns better moving forward. So Anna, we'll come to you finally to get your views why you think that it's important to measure the effectiveness of content. We've had several different elements mentioned by our previous panelists. Do you agree with those? And are there any other things I've missed?
I completely agree with what Reinhardt was saying around leveraging content to define, to get insights. I think that we need to measure content in order to get insight into the overall campaign. So it just gives you a piece of the puzzle of what the customer is looking for and how he is engaging with certain topics. I think that it also allows you to decide how your mix, how your investment across different content pieces of channels should be. I think in the past it was more like, as they have said before, a push versus, okay, this is the best mix for this type of audience and we're going to spend X on this and Y on this and Z on this. I think now there is so much information around how customer is engaging with the search keywords on a daily basis, with the content we have in native content syndication, with the content you have in certain publishers, with the content you have in Google, that you can really extract all of the data, not only to measure ROI, because you have to look at ROI holistically, not only for one specific piece of content, but also extract that information and that data to tell you what is the demand in the market for these topics and how do we best shift our dollars to really align to what the customer is looking for.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Anna. I want to move on to our second and third question, actually. So the second question is going to be looking at ideals and at success, and the third is going to be looking at mistakes and things that we should perhaps avoid when it comes to measuring content marketing. The first is a little bit more general. So for you, and I'm going to go to Dave first, what does success look like when it comes to a company's content marketing? Quite a broad question, but what are your views, Dave? Okay, I think we might be having a couple of problems. Oh, here we go. Dave, over to you.
So for us, I was just saying that it really depends on the type of content and the desire of the interaction that we want to have, that we want to enable with that customer. So we think of content marketing as kind of a facilitation, helping the customer along the journey from discovery, awareness, consideration, and conversion ultimately, and then hopefully the referrals and word of mouth traffic. But so you got to look at it in terms of how engaging is your content. So how many people are you having a conversation with? We might have a social campaign around, focusing on keeping people on the platform. So let's just pick on Facebook, for example, where we have a poll or something to that effect, where we're just trying to get our name out there and be sort of that billboard on the side of the road, as I was saying earlier. Whereas we might have another campaign where we're driving traffic to an article on our site, which, dual types of content going on there. But I guess I would say, and without going on too much longer, you should define what your intended action is before you launch a content marketing campaign, and then set up your KPIs accordingly. So if you want to keep people on platform and then just get that in front of more people on platform versus having that website click-through be your metric, then that's something that has to be defined ahead of time.
Okay, I see. Thank you very much for that, Dave. And Anna, I'd like to come to you next. So do you feel the same sort of way? Is this something that very much depends on both the customers that you're reaching out to, the kind of content you have, and your specific goals?
Well, I completely agree with what Dave was saying around this engagement. I think we need to go beyond what we have in the past measure like clicks, that it really didn't tell you anything around the quality of the customers that were engaging with that content and look beyond that and begin measuring quality engagement, because you want to make sure you have the right piece of content at the right time in the right location for your customers. And I think the second piece, when I think about success, and it depends on the size of the company. For a big company like Dell, it's very important that we are working together across the team, like my team, who is driving the digital strategy, with the team that is developing the content and the creative, and the team who is building the site, the website, because all of us have to be in the same page, all of us to have the same goals and the same direction. I think in the past, some companies, even in our company, we have worked in silos, and everybody had different goals, and that just make it really complicated to have one direction.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Anna. And Reinhardt, what do you feel that success should look like? What should these companies be striving for when it comes to their content marketing campaigns?
Sure. I do think, and maybe this is, a little simplistic or obvious, but I always think it's important to look at things like bottom line growth and sales, and kind of compare how that changes and grows over time against whatever marketing mix you've established, and maybe kind of play with the mix to determine what works in terms of reaching more people and actually, leading to real revenue growth or sales growth as a company. In addition to that, and this is, the result of being so kind of immersed in the social world, I think it's important to look at content marketing performance sort of outside of your owned channels. So it's good to look at, aside from the fact that we were really happy with this piece of content, we got a lot of people to view it on our website. Is it something that, generated, forgive me for using the overused word, but some sort of a viral impact? Are people talking about this when they leave our own channels? Or are they just kind of sharing it amongst themselves because they think it's good content? Or is it just sort of like the best content we had to offer, so when they're in our environment, that's what they're looking at?
I see. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Jeff, I want to come to you with a slight progression from that question, and based on something that we've just been asked by one of our attendees, and that's looking at specific metrics. So what do you feel are the best metrics to focus on if you're going to be measuring quality engagement, and maybe some other metrics that will help to define a consumer's progress down their sort of customer journey to becoming a buyer?
Sure. I will definitely answer that, but let me just take a slight step back before I do, because a lot of the things that Anna and Dave were saying really resonated, and I want to just build on them a little bit. When we first sit down with a client to think about a program, the first question we ask is, who are we trying to reach? And you'd be shocked at how often people don't know who we're trying to reach, or their sense of who they're trying to reach is so broad because of the way media works now and the way social works now. You can pretty much, you're going to cover such a wide group regardless of who your intended audience is. So the first thing we try to do is really zero in very specifically on who we are trying to reach and what we can understand about those people. Then we ask ourselves, what can we say to these people that is truly distinctive? Because given that everyone is investing in content marketing, the only way to rise above the noise is to say something that is unique, that is distinctive, that can't be gotten anywhere else. Then we ask, how are we going to reach them? What channels do they use? What are their preferences? What's the formats? And then finally, and this really speaks to your question, what do we want them to do once we have reached them? If we succeed in understanding who these people are, if we can tell them something distinctive, if we know how to reach them, what do we want them to do once we've done that? And that starts to get to the KPIs. So depending on what we're the answer to the question, and very broadly, we think in terms of there's a set of KPIs that we think about for reach, there's a set that we think about for engagement, there's a set that we think about for lead generation, each of which are different and have different values, and we would optimize the program differently to focus on the different KPIs. So for instance, in engagement, we think about things that are proxies for connections, like repeat visits, amount of time on the site, the bounce rate, the shares, things that really are proxies that say that we are connecting from a content point of view. So each of the different buckets, reach, engagement, lead generation, have different KPIs, and often programs have a combination of those things depending on how far across the journey our campaign goes.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Jeff. That's really, really useful. And Dave, I'd like to come to you next and get a sense from you as to the sort of metrics that you're looking at when you're measuring effectiveness. So Jeff mentioned there being 3 main buckets, and this may be slightly different for you, but reach, engagement, and lead generation. And we've got some ideas in terms of metrics for engagement. If we go to reach, what are the sort of things that you're measuring to determine one's success?
Sure. So I guess you can define reach in a couple of different ways. One, I guess the more straightforward, if you're talking about, let's say, a social media post, how many eyeballs or how many people do you get that post in front of? So the typical reach across Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever it is. I think you can probably extend that a little bit to the reach of on-site content. So maybe even an organic search reach, right? So how many people are actually coming to view articles or other kind of related content. So for us, it would be things like our Inner Circle, which is sort of a news and article hub for life insurance, specifically for farmers. We would look at how many viewers we were able to draw in from various channels. So we can say that the reach of a post or reach of an advertisement itself is something that we measure, as well as the reach of our content kind of overall broadly. So then when we're looking at kind of engagement, then I think you can probably do the same type of thing. So how many folks or how many comments, positive or negative, did we garner across the social networks? And then for the on-site metric, it would be, so how long did they spend on the page? What was the bounce rate? If it's an article and if it's just a one-off, you're just trying to get that in their head, maybe a high bounce rate's okay. But still, it's something you want to keep an eye on. And then ultimately conversion. So I think that one's pretty straightforward. So they would either click to call or purchase online or somehow start that sales interaction with us, but we can say that they've moved into that stage of the funnel. Yeah, so those are the kind of things we're looking at.
Great, thank you very much, Dave. And Anna, I want to come to you next to go through something that we discussed briefly before the call, which is around measurement and agility, and learning in a real-time way and being able to adjust one's marketing campaign as it is happening. So I wonder if you, and this is again based on a question that's come in from our audience, if you can provide some examples of using measurement to adjust your content strategy, both on the fly and then perhaps post-campaign as well, if we're moving a bit more slowly.
Absolutely. Traditionally, the way we were working our campaigns was we were launching a campaign at the beginning of the quarter, so at the beginning of the 3 months. We will run the campaign for 3 months, and then we will do a deep dive on what worked, what didn't work, and make changes from there. We actually moved into the agile methodology back in March. We had this huge campaign that was launching in market called Future Ready for all our enterprise solutions. It was a US campaign, multi-million-dollar campaign that's running through the year, and it has different components. We were doing all the way from awareness pieces and videos, and we were working with the PGA, the golf, all the way down to things that were more engagement, and we eventually want to drive conversion with topics around specific storage offers and servers and WinServer migration and so on. So we brought together to make this work was basically a methodology where you are looking real time and making changes. So we brought together on a weekly basis. So we meet every week for 3 hours as the official meeting, where we have the content and creative teams for all the different type of content that we have. You have the site teams and the digital, so search, social media, and our agencies. And we all get together, look at results for, again, across the funnel for the KPIs that we defined, and more important, the goals. We're looking to have positive trends. It's not that we have a goal at the beginning of the quarter and just because we beat the goal, we are good. No, we want to keep growing and increasing our results. And then we look at what are the top performers and bottom performers at the vehicle level, at the vendor level, at the channel level, so social media versus search and so on, at the site. So you can begin thinking of this matrix that have it's multidimensional, have more than 3 dimensions to try to understand what is driving demand, what content is working, why is it working and not working, and what can we do different. And as soon as we have begun doing this, the content team is working on the fly. So we just had a meeting yesterday and this morning, and they already are making changes and trying to have push changes to the content for tomorrow, Monday. So it's for the first time, again, we are not going to the regular, hey, let's launch the campaign and let's finish the campaign to see what we want to change. But now we're just making changes real time. It's almost every day. We are also, as I said, looking at metrics and measuring performance, and that's, I think, the main thing that is motivating the team to see that our performance keeps growing, over time, week to week. And this has been a huge undertake. The other thing that has helped is to change the dynamic of the team. So before, if you go to the content team will say, oh, I don't have time. I cannot make changes. You have to wait until next quarter to have your new assets. But now they can really see and have the hands-on to say, okay, I'm really influencing results. I can really see the impact of this asset, what's the impact in the overall campaign, and they are eager to help. They are becoming also more experts and learning about media, and I think that's important, and about digital, and what this native content syndication means, and what the social media can be done, and so on. So all of that are things that for them are insights into making changes into the way we are doing business. We are with this setting a playbook, and we want to now begin adopting this model into other campaigns that go across the organization.
Fantastic. Okay, that's fascinating, Anna, and sounds like a great way to not only improve one's content marketing and marketing on the fly, as you say, but also really engaging the rest of the team and using this as an opportunity for better internal engagement and getting people aligned internally, which is great. Reinhardt, I just want to go back to that question with you as well, and your experience both with Tracx and with the clients of your company. Can you give us some examples of where you've seen measurement be used to adjust content strategy on the fly and in a relatively agile way?
Sure. I mean, it's sorry, I just paused for a minute because there's a lot that I could say here. I mean, really, our entire platform is kind of centered around real-time information because we're in the social space. So in that sense, I think the software that we offer is really sort of geared towards being that kind of canary in the coal mine for the performance of marketing content. So, when you launch a campaign, you can gauge in more or less real time what's happening with it, what the consumer response is. Beyond that, and this is a little bit of a shift from the question, but a lot of the answers kind of got me thinking along this line. What a lot of our kind of advanced customers have been doing, because there's so much greater access to data now and this giant explosion of data, there's been initially kind of a land grab to get all this information and have it on hand and consolidate it. And now that a lot of the heavy lifting in that regard has been done, there's a lot of interest in kind of looking for correlation. So being able to identify metrics from one arena that have an impact on another arena. The most kind of tangible example I can give is we have a client that's looking to see which social metrics are indicators of a likely increase in sales. And the metrics themselves can get fairly granular. I mean, it can be something as specific as, you know, positive consumer comments on a Facebook page has a correlation with an increase in sales. And I think we're just sort of at the tip of the iceberg with that kind of research and that kind of analysis. But it's really exciting to me because I do feel like that's sort of the direction that all of this is going, and social data is very much tied into that.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. I'd now like to actually get another bit of feedback from our audience on a similar topic. So we're going to open up our second poll now. And our second poll looks at the extent to which you consider your own content marketing to be data-driven. How much progress have you guys made in using data to change your content marketing and improve it? So you have 4 options, and we'll have another 15-20 seconds to answer those. Starting at not at all. Data doesn't play any part in our content strategy. Then maybe slightly less extreme, not specifically. So data does provide direction for wider marketing strategy, but not specifically relating to content. Your third option is to a reasonable extent. So some but not all of our content is directed by data analysis. And the fourth option is very much so. We feed our data insights quickly and effectively back into our content strategy. So I am going to give you another countdown to get your answers in. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's see what our results are. So again, it looks like people are beginning to make progress. So the dominant answer with 41% of the vote is to a reasonable extent, in that some of our content strategies are directed by data analysis. There are 32% who are using data to inform their marketing, but not necessarily content specifically. And then there are a relatively healthy 20% of people who say very much so. Data is fed quickly and effectively back into our content strategy. So Reinhardt, I'd like to go back to you and get your view on these figures. Do these surprise you? Do these sound about right, given where you see your own clients at Tracx?
They sound about right. I guess it's nice that people feel they're data-driven to a reasonable extent. I think being data-driven to an unreasonable extent probably wouldn't be a good thing. But I would actually say, in addition to the fact that the results don't surprise me that much, I think, and this is maybe a surprising stance to take as someone who works for a big data company, but I think having your content marketing be data-driven to a reasonable extent is probably a good best practice. I think it is important to remember that content is, it's essentially a creative exercise. So, completely overrunning something creative with data can be detrimental at times. But at the same time, feeding your content creators useful metrics and as far as performance and consumer opinions and things like that does have its place. But I still think it should be, to a large extent, kind of used to plan and sort of start the process for creative content rather than be the only factor.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks very much, Reinhardt. I do want to move into, in the interest of time, the last couple of questions that we've got on data and customer insight and how that can inform one's content marketing. So Jeff, I'm gonna come to you next. So Anna has already mentioned a relatively complex system that they have over at Dell for passing on information internally and ensuring that performance and customer insight that is often set over various different departments within the business are collated in a way that gives you a holistic and a useful view to inform future content strategy. Could you give us a bit of a sense as to how things are at The Economist and what you would suggest is a good way to ensure that performance and customer insights are collated holistically?
Let me do what we do at The Economist, which is reference another study we did. This is a little broader, but it's really on point. We talked to marketers about the future of marketing, and it wasn't specific about content marketing, although the idea of engagement and owning the customer experience from end to end was central to what marketers were seeing. But the biggest opportunity that we saw emerging from all of this, and it's really the combination of all the data that is being collected, not just through content marketing, but through all the interactions that marketers are having now that they're sitting so firmly in the center of the enterprise, is to inform the rest of the company in ways that they never could before. So really giving very clear guidance back to unexpected parts of the company, places like, well, product development or even supply chain or finance, certainly customer service, places where the traditional functional distinctions that have up to now really created silos among.
You've broken up slightly there, Jeff. I don't know whether you can repeat the last 5 to 10 seconds or so. You were talking about silos. Okay, I think I'm going to move over to Dave. Dave, I'd really like to get a sense as to how things are organised at Farmers Insurance, and understand how you guys ensure that performance and customer insights all come together to provide a holistic and complex view of the customer.
Right. So the first step that I had taken coming on board a couple of years ago here was to start building out our key performance indicator dashboard, which right now is honestly quite large, which is fine for me because I love to get into the weeds of the data. I'd like to see how many people are clicking on all of the links and spending time across our site, what's driving them there, what is the user pathing, and so on, what is the dispositioning of leads that we send out to agents. So end to end, I'm very deep in the weeds. I'm kind of a data geek in that way. But that, I will say, doesn't necessarily translate when you're speaking with the executive leadership team. Maybe they don't care so much about all these fine little details of customer interaction with us. So what we've done was to boil out, whatever, bring to the surface some of the high-level key takeaways that we can report on a monthly basis, weekly basis as necessary, that sort of keep our finger on the pulse, so to speak, of how customers are moving through the journey, through the funnel, how we're bringing them into the farmer's family from the top all the way through to ultimately establishing a policy or policies with us. So it's kind of goes back to that old maxim of know thyself. So what are the goals that you are setting out for yourself in terms of getting people into the funnel? So if you've got a video marketing campaign, then you're measuring how many people are obviously watching that video, and then trying to track them to see if they ultimately take a next step and visit you. So it's not just the individual pieces of content that you're measuring, but trying to see as best you can how they kind of fit together. So, for example, if you're driving a large viewership of video content or online news and article content, but then you see no interaction down the funnel, then something's not working. So developing a KPI, just for whatever that means for your industry at each stage, is definitely important, and that that key set of KPIs, let's say, is what we share internally in order to sort of proselytize and sell what we're doing internally to get more funding, to get more awareness of the value that we add to the company and deliver to the consumer.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much, Dave, for that answer and for your insights there. Unfortunately, given our time constraints, I am going to have to close up for questions right now and finalize our webinar. So apologies if I wasn't able to get around to your question. I think we covered a few. I would, of course, like to thank today's excellent speakers, Jeff, Anna, Reinhardt, and Dave, for their insights and for their contributions and examples. So before everyone leaves to get a well-deserved coffee or potentially lunch, in my case, we are going to be sending out the recording of this webinar next week. So no need to worry if you did miss any parts of the discussion. It will be on its way to your inbox shortly. And what is more, if you do still have questions that you would like answering in person, then this year's Insight Content Marketing Summit is going to be bringing together another 35 leading corporate speakers in the content marketing space in Chicago on November the 16th and the 17th. We hope it will be warm. You can see on your screen some of the brands that will be speaking and sharing their best practice at the summit. And we are just about to send you through a link to download the brochure, which will give you some more detail on the topics that we're covering and the speakers that are involved. So do be sure to check out that speaker lineup and that relatively comprehensive agenda. Thank you once again to our panelists and to all of you for joining us. And I hope that everybody has a great rest of their day. Thank you very much. Goodbye.